There are 7 dark life lessons society doesn't want you to learn, and most people spend their entire lives running from every single one of them. Not because the lessons are complicated, because they are uncomfortable. Because accepting them means letting go of something most people have been holding on to since childhood. The idea that if you are just kind enough, agreeable enough, available enough, the world will treat you fairly in return. It won't. It never did. And the people who figured that out early did not become cold or bitter. They became clear. They stopped being surprised by human behavior. They stopped handing their peace away to people who never deserved the access. And they started moving through life in a way that most people around them could feel, but could never quite name. What you are about to hear is going to make some things in your past suddenly make a lot of sense. Machiavelli believed people hide their true intentions behind social masks. Schopenhauer believed suffering changes the lens through which you see reality. And Democritus believed real peace only becomes possible when you stop outsourcing your self-worth to other people's opinions. These 3 thinkers, separated by centuries, arrived at variations of the same conclusion. The world operates differently than most people are taught to believe. And once you see it clearly, you cannot unsee it. The first dark lesson is one that most people learn the hard way, usually after years of doing everything right by everyone else's standards and still feeling like something is fundamentally off. The more desperately you chase being liked, the less people actually respect you. That sounds harsh, but think about the people in your life who carry the most genuine weight in a room. Not the loudest ones, not the ones working hardest to be agreeable, the ones who are completely comfortable being exactly who they are, whether or not everyone in the room approves. There is something about that quality, that settled, unbothered sense of self, that draws people in whether they want to admit it or not. And then think about the opposite. The person who adjusts their opinion the moment someone pushes back. The one who laughs too quickly at jokes that are not funny. The one who apologizes before they have even finished the sentence. Most people have been that person at some point. And most people can feel, even while doing it, that it is costing them something. It is costing them the very thing they are trying to earn. Human beings are not wired to respect what feels easy to control. That is not a character flaw in the people around you. It is just how psychology works. When someone senses that your emotional state depends on their approval, they gain leverage over you without even trying. Some people will use that leverage gently. Some will use it carelessly. And some will use it deliberately. But in every case, the leverage only existed because the need was visible. Machiavelli understood this in political contexts, that showing need is showing weakness, and weakness invites pressure. The same principle runs through every human relationship. The moment you stop performing for the crowd and start operating from a genuine internal sense of who you are and what you value, something shifts. You stop being so easy to rattle. And people notice, not always consciously, but they notice. The second lesson is one that takes most people at least one significant betrayal to fully absorb. Not everyone who listens to you is listening for your benefit. Most people overshare because it feels like connection. You open up, the other person opens up, there is warmth in that exchange, and it feels like trust is being built. Sometimes that is exactly what is happening. But sometimes the person across from you is not collecting your words to understand you. They are collecting them to know you. And knowing you, knowing your fears, your insecurities, your emotional patterns, what you cannot stand, what you desperately want, gives them a map they may not use today or even this year, but that map exists. And in a moment of conflict, in a moment where something between you goes sideways, that map has a way of coming out. This does not mean you should never trust anyone. Real connection requires genuine vulnerability, and a life spent completely guarded is its own kind of prison. But there is a significant difference between meaningful openness with someone who has earned it over time and the kind of emotional carelessness that comes from needing to be heard so badly that you pour yourself out to whoever is willing to listen. Schopenhauer believed suffering forces people to see the world more clearly, and most people's education on this specific lesson comes from a moment where something they shared in confidence was used against them in a way they never saw coming. After that happens, the way you carry yourself in conversations changes permanently. You become more observant. You start noticing who asks questions to understand versus who asks questions to gather. You get more comfortable with silence. And silence, it turns out, is one of the most underrated forms of personal power there is. The person who talks the most in any room usually reveals the most. The person who listens and says little is taking in everything while giving away almost nothing. The third lesson is something most people encounter through experience with someone they admired or trusted, and then watch change the moment they gained a little power. Power does not transform people. It reveals them. When someone has no leverage, no authority, no advantage over others, they have every reason to perform their best qualities. Kindness costs nothing when you need people. Humility is easy when you have nothing to be arrogant about. Generosity is simple when it earns you goodwill you depend on. But the moment a person gains status, authority, money, or some kind of advantage over the people around them, the performance becomes expensive to maintain. Keeping up the humble act when you no longer need to be humble requires genuine character, and genuine character turns out to be rarer than most people want to believe. You have probably seen this. A manager who was perfectly collegial as a peer and became controlling the moment they got a title. A friend who was loyal and warm while things were difficult and turned distant and dismissive once their circumstances improved. Someone who was all warmth and generosity while they needed something from you, and seemed to forget your name the moment they no longer did. Machiavelli was direct about this. People adapt their behavior to what benefits them in a given situation, and the most accurate read of someone's actual character is not how they behave when they need you. It is how they behave when they don't. Watch how people treat those who cannot do anything for them. Watch how they speak about people who are no longer in the room. Watch what they do with power when they think no one important is paying attention. That behavior is the truth. Everything else is positioning. The fourth lesson is one that many genuinely good people struggle with for years before they finally accept it. Being a good person does not automatically protect you from being taken advantage of. In fact, for a specific kind of person, your goodness is not an obstacle. It is an invitation. Kindness that has no limits reads as availability. Patience that never runs out reads as permission. A person who never sets a limit sends a quiet but clear message to everyone around them. There is no cost to how you treat me. And people, not out of malice but out of basic human nature, tend to behave accordingly. They keep taking because nothing stops them. They keep pushing because nothing pushes back. Good people often grow up with a belief that the world operates on some version of fairness, that honesty is rewarded, that loyalty is returned, that hard work is recognized. And then life starts delivering evidence to the contrary. The most loyal person in a group is often the most taken for granted. The most reliable employee tends to be buried under work that less reliable people avoid it. The most available friend often becomes everyone else's emotional landfill because they have demonstrated they will absorb anything without complaint. This is not the world being cruel to good people specifically. It is the world responding with perfect consistency to the absence of limits. The old saying about good fences making good neighbors sounds counterintuitive until you understand what it actually means. Clear limits do not damage relationships. They create the conditions in which genuine respect can exist. Without them, many people will keep taking until there is nothing left, not because they plan to, but because nothing indicated that they should stop. Setting emotional and personal limits is not selfishness. It is the basic maintenance of the self. And for people who are raised to equate self-sacrifice with goodness, that realization is one of the most genuinely liberating things they will ever give themselves permission to accept. The fifth lesson is uncomfortable in a specific way because it cuts against something that modern culture actively sells as a problem to be solved. Learning to be alone, genuinely alone, not just physically by yourself, but mentally comfortable in your own company, is one of the most important things a person can develop. And most people will do almost anything to avoid it. Not because they are weak, because they were never taught that it was a skill, and because the discomfort of solitude, when you are not used to it, is real. When things go quiet and there is no phone to check, no conversation to jump into, no noise to drown out the inside of your own head, something surfaces. Thoughts that were easier to outrun when you are moving. Questions about your own life that are much harder to face when there is no distraction available to redirect your attention. Schopenhauer believed many people fill their lives with constant social noise specifically to avoid sitting alone with uncomfortable truths about themselves. And watching the way most people interact with silence, the reflexive reach for the phone the moment there is a pause, the compulsive need to fill every quiet moment with input, suggest he was onto something. The person who cannot be alone with themselves ends up dependent on other people to feel okay. They need the distraction, the company, the affirmation of being around someone else, just to feel like their internal world is manageable. And that dependency, needing other people present to regulate your own emotional state, becomes leverage that people with bad intentions are very good at finding and using. The person who is afraid of being alone will accept far more than they should rather than face the silence. They will stay in situations they know are damaging because the alternative feels worse. They will tolerate behavior that would be completely unacceptable if the fear of emptiness was not sitting right behind it. Learning to be genuinely comfortable alone does not make you antisocial. It makes you free in a specific and very real sense. Free to leave situations that are not working. Free to choose connection from a place of genuine desire rather than desperate need. Free to stop settling for whatever fills the space and start waiting for what actually belongs there. The sixth lesson challenges something that runs deep in most people. The unexamined assumption that the life they are living is actually the life they chose. Most people are not living by genuine choice. They are living by accumulated programming, habits, expectations, patterns of behavior that were installed early and rarely questioned. From the time most people were children, they were absorbing a picture of what success looks like, what a good life is supposed to look like, what kind of person is worth being. And most of that picture was handed to them by people who were also just running their own inherited programming, passing along the version of reality they received without ever fully examining whether it was true. The result is that a significant number of people spend large portions of their adult lives chasing things they were told to want, living inside structures they were told were correct, performing identities that were shaped more by social expectation than by honest self-examination. And the scariest part is that the system is specifically designed to make this hard to notice. Constant entertainment, constant comparison, constant noise. The average person's day is structured in a way that makes deep self-reflection genuinely difficult. You wake up, absorb external input immediately, navigate a day full of other people's agendas and expectations, and collapse into more external input at night. There is very little architecture in most people's lives for the kind of honest, unhurried, genuinely searching self-examination that would be required to figure out whether any of it is actually working for them. Machiavelli understood that social pressure shapes individual behavior more powerfully than most people are willing to acknowledge. Most people are more afraid of being rejected by their group than they are of living an unfulfilling life. And that fear keeps people inside boxes they never consciously chose to inhabit. Thinking independently, actually thinking, not just adopting the contrarian position as a new form of conformity, is one of the rarest and most genuinely countercultural things a person can do. It is also one of the most necessary if you want to build a life that actually belongs to you. The seventh lesson is the one that causes the most ongoing, unnecessary suffering for the most people, and it is simply this. You are never going to be correctly understood by everyone. Some people will misread your limits as coldness. Some will misread your independence as arrogance. Some will misread your confidence as a threat. Some will take your silence as hostility, your directness as aggression, your refusal to over-explain yourself as dismissiveness. And no amount of clarification, patience, or effort to present yourself more accurately will change this for those specific people, because they are not seeing you. They are seeing themselves, their own fears, their own insecurities, their own history, and projecting it onto your behavior. Machiavelli understood that public image is unstable precisely because perception is filtered through the perceiver's own psychology, not through objective reality. This is important to understand not just intellectually but emotionally, because a significant amount of human suffering comes from trying to correct other people's misreadings. Spending mental and emotional energy crafting the perfect explanation that will finally make someone understand you. Adjusting your behavior to preemptively prevent misinterpretation. Carrying the anxiety of knowing someone has the wrong idea about you and feeling like it is your responsibility to fix it. All of that energy spent on a project that is largely impossible because you cannot control the lens through which another person processes you. Democritus believed real peace comes from within, from a stable internal foundation that does not require everyone outside of it to understand, approve, or agree. The most mature thing you can develop is the quiet, settled conviction that you do not need to be correctly understood by every person who encounters you. That some misreadings are simply the cost of being a person in the world. That your sense of who you are does not need to be defended against every misinterpretation. That you can keep moving forward clearly and steadily without requiring everyone in the vicinity to understand exactly what you are doing or why. That kind of inner stability is not something anyone can give you. It is built in the way all genuinely durable things are built, slowly, through experience, through the accumulation of moments where you chose your own honest assessment of yourself over someone else's distorted one, and it held. Here is what connects all 7 of these lessons at the deepest level. Every single one of them is about the same fundamental shift from meeting the world to behave a certain way for you to feel okay, to building the internal foundation that keeps you stable regardless of how the world behaves. Emotional independence, not coldness, not disconnection, not indifference to other people. The specific, trainable capacity to feel fully without being governed by feeling. To care about people without depending on them to manage your internal state. To move through environments that are trying to manipulate, distract, or destabilize you without those environments succeeding, because there is something solid at the center of you that does not move. Machiavelli, Schopenhauer, and Democritus were separated by centuries and came from completely different intellectual traditions. But all 3 of them kept arriving at a version of the same truth. The people who navigate life most effectively are not the ones who are handed the best circumstances. They are the ones who see most clearly about human nature, about their own psychology, about the gap between how the world presents itself and how it actually operates. That clarity is not comfortable. It costs something. It requires letting go of stories that were easier to live inside. But what it produces is something that comfort never could. A version of yourself that is genuinely difficult to manipulate, genuinely difficult to destabilize, and genuinely free in a way that most people spend their entire lives performing without ever actually reaching. You do not have to learn these lessons the hard way, but most people do. And if you already have, if something in this hit close to home and you recognized your own story in it, then you already know that the discomfort was not the end of something. It was the beginning of seeing clearly. And once you start seeing clearly, everything changes. Here is the thing about dark lessons that nobody warns you about going in. They do not feel like lessons when they are happening. They feel like loss. They feel like failure. They feel like something going wrong that was supposed to go right. The friend who turned on you did not feel like a psychology lesson at the time. It felt like betrayal. The job that overlooked you for years while rewarding people who worked half as hard did not feel like a lesson in how approval-seeking limits your leverage. It felt like injustice. The relationship you stayed in too long because being alone felt worse than being unhappy did not feel like a lesson about emotional dependency. It felt like love, or at least something close enough to confuse the two. That is the specific cruelty of dark lessons. They disguise themselves as misfortune right up until the moment you develop enough clarity to see what they were actually teaching. And the people who extract that teaching, who look honestly at the pattern underneath the pain instead of just absorbing the pain and moving on, are the ones who stop repeating the same situations with different details attached. They do not get immune to difficulty. Nobody gets immune to difficulty, but they stop being surprised by it in the same way. They stop handing access to themselves so freely. They stop confusing emotional intensity with genuine connection. They stop mistaking someone's need for them with someone's actual care for them. Those are not small distinctions. Those distinctions are the difference between years spent in the same cycle and genuine forward movement. Schopenhauer's most controversial idea, and the one that tends to land hardest for people who have been through something genuinely difficult, was that suffering is not a deviation from the normal order of things. It is woven into the fabric of being alive, and the people who understand that stop spending their energy being shocked and angry that painful things happen. They redirect that energy into the only place it actually produces anything useful, into their own development, their own clarity, their own capacity to navigate a world that was never as fair or as kind as they were told it was. That is not pessimism. It is the specific kind of realism that stops costing you years of your life. The question worth sitting with after everything you just heard is a simple one. Which of these 7 lessons are you still paying tuition on? Because most people are still in the middle of at least one of them right now. Still in a situation where the approval seeking is costing them more than they are acknowledging. Still oversharing with someone who has not earned that level of access. Still holding on to a connection they already know is not serving them because the alternative feels more uncomfortable than the damage staying causes. Still running so hard from their own silence that they have not had a real conversation with themselves in years. Still living inside a version of life they inherited rather than one they actually examined and chose. None of that is judgment. It is just honest. And honest is the only thing worth being at this point in the conversation, because you came here for something real, not for something comfortable. The comfortable version of this content would have told you that people are mostly good, that kindness is always returned, that hard work is always recognized, that the world rewards those who deserve to be rewarded. That version would have felt good for about 20 minutes, and then dissolve completely the next time reality showed up with evidence to the contrary. This version stings a little in specific places. And the places where it stings are the places worth paying attention to. Because that sting is recognition. That is you knowing something is true before your defenses have had a chance to explain it away. Trust that feeling. It is one of the most reliable guides you have. Machiavelli, Schopenhauer, and Democritus were not pessimists. They were realists who had the intellectual courage to say out loud what most people spend enormous energy avoiding. The world operates on patterns that are consistent, observable, and learnable, if you are willing to look at them honestly. Human behavior follows those patterns whether you understand them or not. The only variable is whether that understanding works for you or against you. Whether you are the person who keeps being surprised by the same dynamics wearing different faces, or whether you are the person who sees the pattern early, adjusts accordingly, and stops paying the same price over and over. That shift from being operated on by human nature to actually understanding it, that is what every dark lesson is ultimately trying to produce. Not bitterness, not suspicion, clarity. The specific, quiet, unshakable clarity of a person who finally sees the world as it is and has made their peace with that seeing. That kind of person is genuinely hard to fool, genuinely hard to manipulate, genuinely hard to destabilize, and genuinely, finally free. If any part of this hits something real in you, if you recognized your own life somewhere in these 7 lessons, drop it in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more, because the people who see clearly live differently, and you just took the first step. Stay sharp,